we find a hadith wherein Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has mentioned that when the shafaq disappears, that's when the Isha Salah shall start. So in terms of the different interpretations of the word shafaq, or actually the word shafaq means twilight, and it has two levels. So level 1 is the disappearing of the redness, and level 2 is the disappearing of the whiteness. So when the sun sets, let's assume this is the sun here. So the sun follows a path. It moves downwards, and these are just for explanation purposes. So when the sun moves downwards on its path and the redness or the red twilight disappears, that is equal to 15 degrees. So assuming that at 15 degrees the time becomes 9:30 p.m. So the sunset occurs at 8 o'clock p.m. and when the sun moves downwards on its path and it reaches 15 degrees, it becomes 9:30 p.m. This is when the redness disappears. And as it's moving downwards, at 9:15 p.m., when the sun reaches 18 degrees, that's when the whiteness disappears. In other words, from sunset to the redness disappearing, or from sunset to the whiteness disappearing, this will create total darkness. And when total darkness begins, that's when Isha Salah time begins. So we follow the view of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah wa ta'ala, who practices upon 18 degrees. Majority of the Hanafi scholars, they practice upon the 18-degree opinion, as this is the precautionary opinion. And when the sun is moving upwards, then the same concept will apply before the Fajr time. So let's assume this is sunrise. So let's assume sunrise is at 7:15 a.m. So when the sun is moving upwards, first it will cross through the 18-degree mark, which is at 5:30 a.m., and then it'll pass to the 15-degree mark, which is at 5:45 a.m., and then it'll move its way upwards until it reaches 7:15 a.m., and the sun is now fully out. So in respect to the Fajr timings, again, this is only for explanation purposes, otherwise the simple and easy method for all of us is just to follow the masjid calendar. But because this is a lesson, this is a dars, and this dars is in light of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that's why it's important for us to understand this. So again, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, the precautionary view is that if this is the case in the month of Ramadan, we follow this time here in terms of our suhood. This means we stop our suhood. We stop eating at 18 degrees. But we do not perform our Fajr Salah until 15 degrees. So let's assume there's a 15-minute margin between both timings. So we will stop it's not working. It's okay. We will stop our suhoor at 5:30 a.m. and we will wait until 5:45 a.m. to start our salah. So nonetheless, this is how the Isha salah timing came into existence, and likewise, this is how the Fajr salah timing came into existence. So the words, we have to wait till the shafaq disappears until total darkness becomes. These are the words of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in terms of the different interpretation of the word shafaq, that's why we have different views. And that's why we find different timings on our masjid calendars. But again, this academic discussion is not for argument purposes. This is simply for academic purposes. Eraser. कोई बात नहीं, आप उसके बगैर करें. माशाल्लाह. Eraser लगाए. Okay, माशाल्लाह.
We call it DOA, death on arrival.
Inshallah, we should discuss the three different postures, the postures of salah. So the postures of salah are distributed into three different types: faraid, wajibat, and sunan. The faraid are 6: takbiratul tahrima, number 2 qiyam, number 3 ruku, number 4 sujud, number 5 qiraat, and number 6 tashahhudul akhira. Wajibat are several, likewise sunan are several. If one farad or if any of these farad are missed out, the salah becomes invalid. There's no way to make it up unless a person repeats his salah, because this is the core. So if the takbir tahrima, which means the opening takbir, Allahu Akbar, this is called takbir tahrima. Because qiyam means standing up. A person who is completely healthy and is able to stand up, if he does not stand up, then again his salah becomes invalid. Ruku, he has to make ruku properly. Sujud, qiraat, and number 6, to sit in the final tashahhud. Wajibat, if any of the wajibat are missed, then the deficiency can be made up by performing sajdat sahwa. And sunan, if any of the sunnahs are missed out, this is a small deficiency, and this deficiency cannot be removed by performing anything apart from making istighfar after salah. Nonetheless, in respect to takbir tahrima, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has mentioned that when you start salah, istaqbil al-qibla wa kabbir, face the qibla and make takbir tahrima. So many a time people come in a rush and they just fold their hands and they start without uttering takbir tahrima. So a person, he must say Allahu Akbar. But Allahu Akbar. That's called takbir tahrima. قيام وقوموا لله قانتين يا أيها الذين آمنوا ركعوا وركوع. All those who believe, make ruku. يا أيها الذين آمنوا ركعوا واسجدوا, and make sujood. Qiraat, a person, he must make qiraat. However, according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, if a person is reciting behind the imam, then the imam's qiraat will suffice on the congregation's qiraat. In respect to tashahhud akhira, the final sitting, so if there are 3 rakat or 4 rakat in the salah, then the first sitting is wajib and the final sitting is fard. To sit in the final sitting according to the duration of the tashahhud. At-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salawatu wa tayyibatu. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabiy wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadana salihin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. To sit for this duration is fard. This doesn't mean that a person gets up immediately afterwards. He should continue with Allahumma salli ala Muhammadan and Rabbi ja'alni muqima salati. But this is just in terms of understanding the different postures and its importance. Just as it was mentioned, if any wajib is missed out, then sajda sahwa needs to be performed. And if any sunnah is missed out, then a deficiency of a small nature occurs. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's life consisted of faraid, wajibat, sunan, mustahabbat, each and every single one of these postures. However, during his lifetime, this was not given any independent status because there was absolutely no need, because the Sahaba radiyallahu, they would have followed Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam in totality. However, they observed his life sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and accordingly the ulama ikram then have deduced these rulings, faraid, wajibat and sunan, in accordance to what he used to do sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This means if there was absolutely no room or concession in respect to leaving out an action, then from that, the Sahaba radiyallahu will understand its importance. That would be categorized as fard, for example. And if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam performed sajda sahwa, which he did on a few occasions, this means that that particular action does not invalidate the salah, rather that deficiency can be removed through sajda sahwa. And again, the Sahaba radiyallahu when they observed Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam doing certain actions and then making that action up by removing that deficiency, that's how they deduce that. And likewise, sunan, if deficiencies are there, then the deficiency need to be corrected. Moving on to the next discussion, inshallah, I'll try to wrap this up very, very quickly. I'll try to be very, very short. That is a discussion of rafa'ul yadayn. Rafa'ul yadayn means to raise the hands when a person goes into ruku and when he gets up from ruku. This is a very common discussion, especially among the masses. So in light of the Quran and Hadith, I would like to shed some light on this topic. First and foremost, this difference of opinion among the imams, this difference of opinion is not a difference of halal or haram, permissible and impermissible. it is a difference of opinion in respect to an act being more virtuous and an act being less virtuous. That means both are permissible, but according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, not to raise one's hands at this particular injunction is more virtuous. And according to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik rahimahullah, and according to Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah ta'ala, it is more virtuous for them to raise their hands. Now this dispute is not in respect to every single raising of the hands. It only focuses on this particular timing, and that is when a person goes into ruku and when a person lifts his head up from ruku. The beginning takbir, which is known as takbir tahrima, everyone is unanimous that a person, he must raise his hands when entering the salah. Allahu Akbar. And everyone is unanimous that when a person goes into sajda or when he gets up from sajda, there is no raising the hands. So the dispute of raising the hands or not raising the hands will only occur when a person goes into ruku and when he gets up from ruku. Just as it was mentioned, this is a dispute of being more virtuous and less virtuous. So some people, they go to the extremes and they start criticizing others. This is impermissible and it's wrong. It's not allowed. Because it's not a matter of halal and haram. It's a matter of preference. And there are ahadith on both sides. Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala, his hadith is used by the Hanafi scholars, wherein Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he mentions that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, I observed him, and he only lifted his hands at the beginning of the salah, at the time of takbirat al-tahrim, and after that he did not lift his hands. So this is one hadith which the Hanafi scholars use. And vice versa, the hadith which the Shafi'i scholars use is the hadith of Ibn Umar. There are more ahadith, but this is just one example. Wherein Abdullah bin Umar radiyallahu anhu mentions that he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam lifting his hands before going into ruku and after getting up from ruku. Now moving on to the amal and the practice of the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. There are a great number of Sahaba on this side and there are a great number of Sahaba on this side. Those companions radiyallahu anhum who did not lift their hands when going into ruku and when getting up from ruku, among them were Umar bin Khattab radiyallahu anhu, Ali bin Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu, Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, Barai bin Azib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And on this side we also have great companions who would raise their hands. So both Hanafi followers are also practicing upon the hadith, and both Shafi'i followers are also practicing upon the hadith. This dispute is a dispute of preference and not a dispute of permissible or being impermissible. And to take it to the next step and start criticizing each other and to start laying these false allegations that you did not practice upon the hadith and we practice upon the hadith, this is completely wrong. So as I mentioned, I try to summarize this discussion, but this discussion is a very lengthy discussion. If we want to bring it and present more ahadith, then we can present more ahadith from both sides. But due to lack of time, it's not appropriate right now. And the objective of the discussion, alhamdulillah, has been proved. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to understand and practice. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah jazakumullah khair.
Inshallah. It's 8:15. We have 2 clocks here. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونسترضيه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا إنه من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Last time, just to get everybody up to speed, alhamdulillah, we talked about the second hijrah to Abyssinia, the Habasha, and how Quraysh at that time felt that they lost a lot of power about this people leaving, and we mentioned that they were close to 100 people, and from houses of the very known and famous families, subhanallah. Even the brother of Amr ibn al-As, that he was the ambassador from Quraysh to negotiate and all that, and the families from Abdullah ibn Rabi'ah, the other one, subhanallah, they were there among the people who traveled and took the asylum in Habasha. So after that, Quraysh, subhanallah, felt we lost all that, and we have lost people, and every house now has Muslims, and we are losing territory. And even despite the torment that we do to all these people, subhanallah, here, that they didn't leave, nothing is changing. And then on top of all that, we talked about the two mountains reaching the Islam, subhanallah, Sayyidina Hamza, Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, and Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anhuma jami'an. So subhanallah, after this, they felt like, okay, what is left? I mean, like everybody is moving to become Muslim, subhanallah, and all this media work and all that, nothing is working. So some of them, they said like, okay, we're going to have to do some kind of siege. And they mentioned we're going to have the siege against Banu Hashim wa Banu Abdul Muttalib. So the main two tribes, Banu Hashim wa Banu Abdul Muttalib. And subhanallah, say the two main points to keep in mind: we are not gonna have any human interaction. So they are not gonna be marrying from us. We're not gonna be marrying to them and all that. So fully kind of like seclusion, segregation of the humanity. And then the second thing is almost like the embargo. There is no bay' wa shira. There is no merchandise changing. We're not gonna buy from them. They are not gonna buy from us. We're not gonna sell to them. They are not gonna sell to us. So we're going to do a full embargo and siege, subhanallah. So they said like the whole thing was like a blockade, all this. And Abdul Muttalib and the rest of the people of Banu Hashim, they went into a Sha'ab. It's called Sha'ab Abdul Muttalib. And they basically stayed there among themselves. And subhanallah, in most of the books of Seerah, that Hisar or siege lasted about 3 years, roughly between the year of 7th to the year of 10th of Ba'tha. So we know that time in Mecca was 13 years. So this is closer to the end of the time of Mecca. So the heightest of the torment and the torture and the siege and all that. And subhanAllah, we mentioned that so we can reflect on what is happening all the time. This is the seerah, gives you the guidance and the light to our daily life, subhanallah. And this is how it should be. So if you see some of that siege, see some of the embargo, you see some of the restriction, you see some of the racist act, we're not going to marry from you, buy from you, do this. This is nothing new. This is how people fight the Muslims and fight the kalimat al-tawheed and fight the nur, subhanallah. وَالنُّورُ الَّذِي أَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُ. Fight the Quran and all that, subhanallah. So this is from the shaitan and his tools to make the humans have all these things, subhanallah. So they went to Sha'ab, Banu Talib, and even, subhanallah, Abu Lahab himself, they mentioned, because he was part of that, he was not happy with this talk about the Hisar, and they mentioned that he made zihar, kind of like, and we talked about hukm zihar before that, like it's almost that was, Islam came and stopped it. The Prophet ﷺ, in one of the times that, and this is Abu Huraira mentioned that, and in Sahih Bukhari or Muslim, they were coming from Mina, and he said, we were going to the valley of Bani Kinana. This is where the kuffar made the treaty to be against the Muslim and all that. And they had this treaty that we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, and a lot of qat'a rahim and fighting the kinship and all this, and a lot of other bad stuff that they put it inside the Kaaba, subhanallah. And that continued for all this time until, subhanallah, the Muslims, we know the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam when he pointing to Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu arda and say, like, by Allah, there was like many days I'm not eating anything except from what this man, pointing to Bilal, hide under his armpits, subhanallah, hiding. So getting food to be to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam during this time, hiding under the armpit of Bilal, subhanallah. And we know the Sahaba, they were mentioning that we were eating from the dead leaves, trees, that subhanallah, the leaves, trees that on the ground, they were eaten until they said, like, subhanallah, their excretion and their poop and all that, subhanallah, like almost like the camel's poop, like very small and kind of like no water, no hydration, nothing, subhanallah. So all this ta'zib, and you see the ta'zib that we are seeing in different countries, subhanallah, what happens to the Muslims. So this is nothing new for Muslims, subhanallah. This is the trials that we are supposed to, inshallah, hopefully withstand and hopefully succeed in it, subhanallah, to show who we are. After this Sahifa happened, some of the Quraysh themselves, among them, nothing has, like they say, leading by Hisham. One man, his name is Hisham ibn Amr. He went to Al-Mut'am ibn Adi and some of the Quraysh and say, Wallahi, this is too wrong and lasted too much and all that, and we cannot do this to our blood, after like almost 3 years. So they gathered, and everyone, like almost as if they were not knowing each other and not actually in agreement, and said, like, we need to cut this, we need to break this, we need to break this. And subhanallah, at the end, it got broken. So at that time, subhanallah, Allah revealed to the Prophet ﷺ that the page of the treaty inside the Kaaba has been eaten, all of it, by the arada, which is one of the insects that can eat papers and stuff like that, and ate every bad thing in the Sahifa, in this paper, except the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the Prophet told his Abu Talib about this. Abu Talib told the people of Quraysh, and subhanallah, they opened the Kaaba and they went and found it exactly as the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam mentioned. And that was the end of the siege. But it took a big toll on the Sahaba and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and his wife Khadija bint Khuwaylid and his uncle, which led to the death of the most support of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So the first one is his uncle, which we talked about, the most support he had in his life. Abu Talib died by the end of the 10th year of Ba'tha of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And the real harm that happened to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in person, everything else was happening to the companions during the time. And we talked about that, about Sayyidina Bilal wa Suhaib and all these, subhanallah, Sahaba facing the torment. But the Prophet ﷺ, and we'll talk about that more inshallah, about him being beaten or being choked and all this, subhanallah, after the death of his uncle Abu Talib. And when Abu Talib coming to the last like few hours, the Prophet ﷺ, and there is more than 2 hadith about that, he went to him. And this hadith, the first in Tirmidhi, and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu arda, when Abu Talib was about to die, and at that time Abu Jahl didn't want to sit anywhere except at the head of Abu Talib, subhanallah, because he knew that the Prophet ﷺ is there and is going to sit. And the Prophet basically all the time, he was asking, Abu Talib at that time asked the Prophet ﷺ, he's dying. So he said, like, what do you want to tell your people? What do you want from them? And the Prophet ﷺ, Ya ammi innama uridu kalima, I only want one sentence. And this sentence that all the Ajam, all the people who are not Arab, they will pay the jizya by it, the jizya to us. And all the Arab will have the status by this word. And the Ammu, his uncle, asked him, what is that word? He said, La ilaha illallah. I only need from them to say La ilaha illallah. Which basically what he wanted his uncle to say as well. Just say La ilaha illallah. And then the people of Quraysh at that time, mentioned أَجَعَلُوا الْآلِهَ إِلَهًا وَاحِدًا. He want to make all the gods just one God. إِنَّ هَذَا لَشَيْءٌ عُجَابٌ. This is so crazy thing, subhanallah. And subhanallah, the ayat came to this like in Surah صاد والقرآن ذي الذكر حتى بلغ إن هذا إلا اختلاق. رواية الشيخين الصحيح البخاري ومسلم عن المسيب بن حزن that Abu Jahl was there, Abdullah ibn Abi Umayyah ibn al-Mughira was there, and he say, أي عم قل لا إله إلا الله أحاج لك به عند الله. Just say لا إله إلا الله, I will get an excuse from Allah, so I can tell him that you said it. Just say one word, you are about to die. And subhanallah, Abu Jahl, all the time he was asking, أترغب عن ملة أبيك عبد المطلب, أترغب عن ملة عبد المطلب. You are staying away from your ancestors and your father Deen and Millah. So subhanallah kept continuing with him, and the Prophet say, قل لا إله إلا الله, and the other one say, أترغب عن ملة عبد المطلب, until he ended up saying, على ملة عبد المطلب, على ملة عبد المطلب. I am dying on ملة عبد المطلب, my father. And he refused to say لا إله إلا الله. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام at that time, and this is in Sahih Bukhari or Muslim, قال والله لأستغفرن لك ما لم أنه عن ذلك. By Allah, I will ask Allah's forgiveness until Allah tells me to not to do that. Don't ask for forgiveness. And subhanallah, he did this, and subhanallah, the ayat came after that in Surah At-Tawbah, ما كان للنبي والذين آمنوا أن يستغفروا للمشركين ولو كانوا أولي قربى. ولو كانوا أولي قربى. It is not permissible for the Nabi and the Mu'min. All of us can make istighfar to the people of shirk, even if they are the closest relative to them, subhanallah. And subhanallah, Al-Hafiz ibn Kathir, the one who has tafsir ibn Kathir, say by subhanallah, Allah has a huge hikmah and wisdom to it. So we know the hidayah is from Allah, no matter how close you are. And you can never be closer to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam like, subhanallah, his uncle Abu Talib. Never. Subhanallah, he lived with him during his ba'tha and all this, loved him the most. And the Prophet loved him the most, subhanallah. And despite that, he ended up in the hellfire. This is very important for us to understand and grasp. Which bring us a point, exactly 13 minutes. I'm going to give 3 more minutes, Sheikh, if you can, which is the hidayah. Inshallah, we'll finish this. There are 2 kinds of hidayah. And the Quran, and this is important for you to understand. The Quran is saying, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. This is also revealed to the Prophet ﷺ after that event. You do not guide the one that you love, but Allah is the one who guides. Subhanallah. إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. Ulama saying, تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ هِدَايَتُهُ. This is one explanation. You do not guide the one who you love to guide. And another explanation, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ. You do not guide the one that you love. Meaning that the Prophet ﷺ had the love of tab'a to his uncle, subhanallah, despite it being kafir. And this is a whole issue of like, you can love the one that like your son, your wife, things like that, even if they are kuffar, but they call it hub taba'i. This is by nature, like your father, my son, and all this. Not hub shar'i. This can never be hub shar'i, because hub shar'i only for the sake of Allah. So this is the first kind of hidayah. The hidayah that Allah is saying, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. This is the hidayah al-tawfiq wal-ilham. This is only Allah has. But in other parts of the Quran, subhanallah, that Allah is mentioning about the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ هُدَاهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. This is all for the hidayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنَّكَ لَتَهْدِي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. وَإِنَّكَ لَتَهْدِي إِلَى صِرَاطٍ مُسْتَقِيمٍ. Indeed, Ya Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, you guide into the Sirat al-Mustaqim. So this is the second kind of guidance, which is the guidance of the hidayah of guidance and irshad wa dalala. This is like the people who make da'wah. So you guide people to tell them, this is a light here, this is a right road, this is a right street. Both kinds from Allah, because who is mentioning the guidance and all that? Both from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But one is for just the road is there, go there, and the other one is when Allah wants somebody to walk that light road, subhanAllah. no matter how much you love them, you cannot have them walk on that road of hidayah. I hope this is clear to us, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Inshallah, we'll continue next time.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين والعاقبة للمتقين أما بعد. Inshallah, today we're still in Kitab al-Salah or Book of Salah, but some ahkamat and rulings about the jama'ah, the congregation, the fadail, and some ahkamat we'll quickly discuss. First of all, we know how important it is that Salah be prayed in a congregation, a masjid and jama'ah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions it multiple times in the Quran as well, like وَرْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ, oh people do ruku along with those who are doing ruku, meaning everyone get together and together they worship Allah Azza wa Jal. That is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encouraging people to pray in jama'ah. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, now there are numerous ahadith that every now and then when we discuss when it comes to the virtue, the fadail of praying in a jama'ah, one of them being a person who prays in the masjid, he is rewarded 27 times more than a person who prays alone by himself. Of course, this is for a person who is able to make the jama'ah. We know, especially living here, where people have strict work schedule, oftentimes, especially for the maybe Zuhr and Asr, it becomes very hard for the people to come in the masjid, and since they can't leave their workplace, so for them, there is an uzr, there's an excuse that as long as they're praying their prayer in time, wherever they can find a spot by themselves, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive and still reward them. Jama'ah, how it is described, it is a link that is acquired between the salah of the muqtadi and the imam. So the salah of the muqtadi becomes dependent upon the salah of the imam. Similarly, as example is given, is that the engine of the train, it carries all of the carriages that is linked to it behind it. Similarly, the imam is the one whose salah will be considered. If imam makes a mistake, then that means everybody has to do sajdatul sahaf. But if a person individually makes a mistake, they don't have to do sajdatul sahaf. Why? Because their salah is dependent upon the salah of the imam. Now, jama'ah, for the conditions, it will be formed by one person with the imam in every salah except Jum'ah. So as long as you have two people, one imam, one muqtadi, jama'ah can be formed and a person will receive the reward 27 times more. This is why it is very much emphasized that if two people are outside and the time of prayer comes, that they pray not individually but together in jama'ah to get 27 times more. For the Jum'ah, now according to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, there have to be three people besides the imam. So it has to be one imam and there have to be three more people as muqtadi. Only then the Jum'ah can be established. Now this ruling changes when it comes to, for example, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, or Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. One of their qawl is that you have to have 40 people present. If there are less than 40 people, you can't pray the Jum'ah, according to his opinion. But according to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, as long as three people can be gathered together, three Muslimin, then you can offer Salat al-Jum'ah in Jama'ah. And of course, second condition is that the place that you're praying is a sizable town or a city. If it's somewhere far away, it's a very small population like a village, then there is no Jum'ah on them. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he arrived in Madinah al-Munawwara, and he waited around 2 weeks outside Medina for Ali radiallahu ta'ala an. In those 2 weeks, even though the Jum'ah was made obligatory, yet he did not offer Salatul Jum'ah. Why? Because where he was staying was a very small village. There weren't enough people for the conditions of the Jum'ah to be met. So he didn't offer Jum'ah prayer. Rather, after Ali radiallahu joined him, then he moved towards Medina, and close to him, he offered Salatul Jum'ah in a masjid that is now called Masjid al-Jum'ah. It's in, if you go to Medina al-Munawwara, people often visit that as well, Masjid al-Jum'ah. It's a masjid where only one salah he prayed in there was the Jum'ah. Now, the ruling of Jama'ah, the congregation Jama'ah, is emphasized sunnah mu'akkada for men, similar to wajib in strength, qaribul wujub, for the 5 times salah. This really means that if anybody makes a habit out of leaving the Jama'ah, then he is sinful in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Occasionally, if it happens that a person doesn't wakes up or he has something else to do, he misses the Jama'ah, then he will not be sinful. This is what it means, sunnah mu'akkada qaribul wujub. It is emphasized sunnah, very close to wajib. That means if a person makes a habit not to go to the masjid at all, even if he's praying all 5 prayers on their time, at their time, in his own house, he's being sinful. So it is not permissible to leave Jama'ah except if one has a shari'i valid excuse. He who has the habit of staying away from Jama'ah without an excuse, they will be sinful. Now, Jama'ah is a condition for Jum'ah and Eidain, meaning that Fajr, all 5 prayers can be prayed without congregation, as in the case where people are in their office, they're working, whatever. But Jum'ah cannot be prayed individually. You have to be in a Jama'ah. Similarly, Eidain, the 2 Eid prayers, they cannot be prayed by the people individually. They have to be in the Jama'ah. Now, Jama'ah is Sunnah Kifaya Mu'akkada for Taraweeh, Salah, and Salatul Kusuf. It means that as long as at least a few people in every community are offering Salatul Taraweeh in the masjid, then that means it's enough for the entire community. This is why we see that the people, sometimes they don't join the Taraweeh, or sometimes they'd leave after 2 or 4 or 6 or 8. They don't pray the full. So what it's being said here, that it is Sunnah Kifaya, meaning a few people are doing it and they're praying the entire Taraweeh in the masjid, and that suffices for everyone. Of course, this does not mean that a person says, you know what, other people are praying Taraweeh for me in the masjid, let me just stay at home. This does not mean that. It means that if he had an excuse not to pray Taraweeh, he had to wake up early, or he was too tired, something was going on, and for that one day he missed, there would be nothing on him. But Taraweeh itself is the Sunnah Mu'akkada, the emphasized Sunnah of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even though he himself prayed it only 3 days, but since the Sahaba after him and Ummah after him adopted this Sunnah and they did every single Ramadan, it became emphasized. Now, when does the obligation of attending Jama'ah falls away? When there is no sin upon a person if he misses out on the Jama'ah. Now, there are certain conditions. Number 1, if there is... the ruling of Jama'ah. So Jama'ah is preferred for Witr Salah in Ramadan. This is why we know that throughout the year, only the Witr of the Ramadan that we do in Jama'ah, because that is the preferred method. And that is how the Sahaba did, especially since after the time of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an, that people began to pray Witr as well. This is why ulama, they have said that throughout the year, it is more meritorious that people pray Witr at the Hajj time, except when it comes to Ramadan. In Ramadan, it's better just to pray with the Jama'ah, with the rest of the people. Now, here's another masala. Now, Jama'ah for Nawafil, just optional prayer, is makruh, light makruh, if it was performed by calling others and announcing. Right? There was a specific day of the year, and people normally offer some optional rak'at to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so in that day, there was an announcement being made, everybody come and we will offer this prayer in Jama'ah, whatever reason whatever day that might be. That is light makruh if people were to do that. But if there was no announcement, there was no calling people towards this Jama'ah, and people just got together, for example, in one of the nights of Ramadan, it was i'tikaf, people were here at the masjid, and they just finished with the Taraweeh, and they still have some jazba, some passion, some motivation, encouragement, we need to pray more. And so a person started praying, and a couple people behind him started offering prayer with him, then that's fine because you didn't announce it, you didn't organize it. There is no karaha, there is no dislike in it. But if it was announced beforehand, oh, throughout the last 10 nights, every single night, we're going to offer some additional prayer in Jama'ah in congregation, then it would become makruh, especially according to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, here's another masala. A second Jama'ah, it is makruh in the masjid of the locality that has an imam and the muadhin, and the people had performed salah with adhan and iqamah. Now, here's something needs to be understood here. This is where there's a great disagreement, because according to Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, it is makruh tahrimi. Makruh tahrimi means close to haram. It's forbidden that a second jama'ah be done in a place where the first jama'ah is done already. According to Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, there is no karah that you can just offer the second jama'ah. Ulama, they have said, especially for the people that are living in the West where the masajid are far away and Muslims are very few in number, and it's not like back in home where there's a masjid in every neighborhood and you can just go and come back, walk there and walk back. So to make it easy for the people, ulama, they have allowed it, that a second jama'ah can take place inside the masjid where the first jama'ah has already happened, upon the condition that it not be done close to where the first jama'ah was held, so close to the mimbar. It has to be done in the back. If it's done in the back, then that is fine. However, there's a condition. If a person makes a habit out of it, that throughout the week, 3, 4, 5 times, they're offering their prayer in the second jama'ah, then for that person it will not be allowed. Why? Because now they're taking the jama'ah not seriously, right? Because they'll look at the time and say, oh, I can just join the second jama'ah. There are probably some people praying and I'll pray behind him. This leaves out the importance in their mind of the jama'ah, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, the hadith I mentioned yesterday, that when he came in the morning today actually, when he came back after solving the dispute between the two tribes, the jama'ah had already happened. He didn't say to the sahab that read him, let's pray the second jama'ah in Masjid al-Nabawi. Rather, he went back home. This was to show to the ashab that it's important that we understand and value the first jama'ah that has already happened. So if a person makes a habit out of it, that through 3-4 times a week, he's missing the jama'ah, and in his mind, I'll just join the second one, for him it is not allowed. So occasionally, sometimes it happens, person is getting late, and then another person is starting the jama'ah, then behind you can pray, but not close to the mimbar. Now, when does the obligation of attending the jama'ah falls away? Number one, if there is heavy rain. This was normally true back in the day when they didn't have the roads developed, when they didn't have our mode of transportation. For them, it was extremely difficult. One time, a storm came in the time of Prophet ﷺ, and so announcement was made that Sallu fi buyutikum, that pray at your own house, because it's almost impossible for people to navigate their way and come to the masjid because of the conditions at the time. But nowadays, normally the rain, we continue our everyday schedule. If we have to go to the store, we go to the store. If we have to go to the work, we go to the work. That means we can come to the masjid as well. But in case if there is really heavy rain and the person is a novice driver and they're very nervous, they can't drive, nobody else they can come with, then they might have an excuse. If it is very cold and one fears that if he comes out for salah to the masjid, he will become ill or his illness will become worse. This normally doesn't happen where we are. It doesn't get that cold. But in certain parts of the country, it does get that cold, where the temperature goes to negative and it's deadly frost. So for them, it will be allowed. For us, it depends upon a person, because there might be one person who is used to the cold and he might not be feeling the cold. And there's another person who's not used to that level of cold. Even a little bit might affect him. So we will look at this case by case. If a person is able to come, he has to come. If not, he's weaker, then he can stay at home. If there's a lot of ice and mud on the road, we know that especially it becomes extremely dangerous to drive in that situation. If one is ill, that's understood. If one is very old, he does not have the ability to go to the masjid due to old age, he stays at home. If one is looking after a patient, this is what happened with Abdullah ibn Abbas and Ali radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, as they were taking care of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam towards the end of his blessed life. And so even they wouldn't come to the masjid. They would just stay with Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, taking care of him and make their own jama'ah in his hujrah. If one is stopped by the others, he's about to leave something happens in the family, or he's speeding to the masjid, he gets stopped by the cops, and then he gets a ticket. He's stopped by the others, right? Then it's, if one is getting ready for a journey, one has to go on a trip, and because we know towards the until the very end, there are things that need to be packed, luggage need to be weighed and whatever. So in that case, since he's busy packing and preparing, then he will not be sinful if he missed that last jama'ah. If one fears the loss of his wealth, if he engages in jama'ah, this we've seen in certain countries where theft is very common. I saw one man in Pakistan, he would, in that one specific area, a lot of crimes would take place. So whenever he would come to the masjid, he'd ask his son, who was 16, 17-year-old, that stay by the motorcycle, don't come inside. We don't want somebody to steal it. So the son would be outside looking after the motorcycle, while the father would be praying inside the jama'ah. So if one fears the loss of the wealth, for whatever reason, that is the valid reason. If one fears train departing or the flight leaving, if he stops for the jama'ah, then this oftentimes happens, especially when we have a plane to catch or the airport, whatever. You can just pray by your own self and move on. And the last one is when food is present and the person is starving. This is also better than what I have written. So a person is really starving, right? The reason behind that is that he would not be able to focus on the jama'ah. His whole time he'd be like, when the salah will be over. So the concept Islam is teaching us is not that hurry up, pray, and then you can eat peacefully. It is hurry up, eat, then you can pray peacefully. This is the concept of Islam, the perspective Islam is in. Otherwise, the person, let me just pray in a couple minutes and then I'm going to eat. No. Eat right now in a couple minutes, then you go and pray peacefully. This is what Islam is teaching us. For who is Jama'ah Sunnah Mu'akkada, a person has to be a man. It's not upon the women, adult, not upon the children, sane, not upon the insane, healthy, not upon a person who has an excuse, he's a cripple or he's medically unable to go. Inshallah, we'll discuss these four next time as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the to understand this. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.